Hey everybody, Diggs here for Lockpickers United, and today we're going to be talking about choosing your first pick set and how to avoid one of the most common pitfalls in the sport, which is buying a garbage one. So before I get there, I want to cover two things briefly. As I was pitching the idea for this episode to the guys in the Discord, they brought up two things that come logically before this, and I totally agree with them, so I'm going to cover them. The first is legality. Laws are different everywhere. From state to state, country to country, they vary intensely. And so you need to do some research and figure out, A, is it legal for you to have these picks? And B, what are they going to do if they find them on your person? If you're stopped by the police or if you wind up in an accident, that sort of thing. My best advice, even if it's legal for you to have them and carry them around, is to just leave them at home. You don't need to have picks on you all the time. The only thing that it's going to do is entice you to try and pick something that you shouldn't be picking. And that leads me into the second thing we need to talk about, picking locks in use. You should never pick a lock in use. We see this all the time on Reddit and in the Discord. Some new person will show up with a picture of a lock mounted in a door and ask, "How do I pick this?" And they never ever get help. And it's for very good reasons. One, Locksport doesn't need a shady name. It already has issues with people who don't understand why we do this in the first place. Second, there's a real good chance that a novice is going to break a lock. And once they do break it, they're going to have to pay a locksmith to fix it. So money, broken tools, broken lock, bad rap. And the last thing that someone mentioned is when you're trying to pick a lock, you generally have to kind of contort your body to get yourself into position, and it's an even better chance that you're going to break your tools and or hurt yourself. So please don't do it. Please don't pick locks in use. It'll help everybody in the hobby, and we will appreciate you for it. Now, moving on. This is my pick set, and it's almost entirely Sparrow's lock picks. There's one exception here. This is a Mad Bob pick that I broke on purpose and turned into a slider pick. You can see it's kind of got like a forked appearance on the end there. And that's to grab onto tiny little sliders in Ava locks. And then I've got these three rakes over here that I literally never use. Those came with my tuxedo kit that I got from Sparrow's when I first started. And I keep them around just because at some point I may use them. I don't really know. What you'll find is that a lot of the people in Lockpickers United are purists. And what I mean by that is we only believe in single pin picking. It's more fun. It's more of an art. It takes more skill. And while we probably will briefly cover raking and bumping locks, bypassing them, this channel is mostly about picking them. It's the sport. It's the challenge. So we're not necessarily going for the easiest method of opening a lock. We're going for the most controlled and artful way. So the vast range of picks that you see here are mostly hooks. There's a couple of diamond shapes in here, and some crazy stuff over here. This was one of my favorites. It's a glide. I can't remember if that's half or full. I think that's the half glide. When you're choosing your first pick set, there's a number of factors you need to consider. One, do you actually need a kit or a set? Or could you get by with trying a couple picks out? A lot of times it's much cheaper to buy yourself a tension wrench or two and a pick or two and figure out if you like them or not. A lot of companies will package kits that have all kinds of stuff that you do need and then also all kinds of stuff that you don't need. And the only way that you'll find out what you're not actually going to use is if you buy one and then try it out. You'll figure out real quickly that 4 or 5 picks out of that 35 pick set is what you're going to be using all the time. And if you kind of prescribe to the same idea as us that single pin picking is the way for you, then you'll find that almost all kits actually have rakes in them and you don't even want them. So why buy it? Quick note here, I'm not sponsored by Sparrow's. I just happen to use their stuff. I also have a couple of Peterson picks that have handles on them. It's just that I started with the tuxedo set, right? And the tuxedo picks don't come with handles on them. And I got very used to that feeling. and so that's how I prefer them. Every once in a while, I'll break out a Peterson pick and use them, but much more often, I find what I need in the kit that I have here. And you'll notice these ones over here, these are from the Monstrum set. You can tell they're a different metal, and those things come with handles. I cut them off because I'm used to picks with no handles on them. So it's a personal preference thing, and a good way for you to figure out whether or not you like the handles is to just buy one. And it seems kind of silly, but the absolute best way to figure out what kind of picks you like is to get one of each and then feel them out. Granted, most people don't have the patience or the money for all that shipping to get that done, but that would be like the number one method. Another method that most people use or wind up doing is buying a beginner kit that's got a smaller piece count, that's lower in price from one of the manufacturers, and then testing it out and just seeing what they like about it, what they don't like. And generally what I found is the companies that get used a lot, that get purchased a lot, those people stick with that brand forever. It's rare that you find somebody that switches teams. And since I started with Sparrows, I'm kind of on Sparrows' team. But I'm not sponsored by them. They don't give me money. They don't give me picks. I just happen to use them. So that being said, the brands that get used the most, at least in my experience, by the people in our community are Sparrows, Peterson, Southord, Multi-Pick, and Mad Bob's. I know that HPC has pick sets out there too, and HPC makes some other great locksmithing stuff that I use, tools like followers, for example. But I don't have a pick set from them, and I don't know anybody that does. I just happen to know that they make good stuff, and they also have pick sets. So they're worth checking out. Because of copyright reasons, I can't really show you all of these different companies' websites. So rather than going through every manufacturer and every kit that they make at the various price points and showing you each piece and all that, which would just be an exhaustive video, we decided it would be smarter to just talk about what you're going to want to use early on, and that way you can shop around on your own and see which kits have it and which ones don't, and possibly just make yourself your own by buying individual hooks, individual wrenches, and saving a bunch of money doing it. So just to show you some basic stuff maybe you don't know, these wrenches over here are called bottom of the keyway tension wrenches, and these over here are called top of the keyway tension wrenches. And they have a pretty obvious difference, but I'll demonstrate it anyway. So what I have here is a First Watch. It's basically an American 1100 clone. And so your bottom of the keyway tension wrench sits exactly where you think it would, in the bottom of the keyway. And what you'll see is, as you're using this, you've actually blocked off a bunch of this keyway that you can use to pick. So in these locks, you can almost go straight up and down if your pick is thin enough. And when you put this bottom of the keyway tension wrench in there, you just stole a bunch of room to work in from yourself. So you'll find pretty early on that you're going to want to shift from bottom of the keyway in all locks that you can to top of the keyway, which is one of these guys. This particular wrench is a heavy bar from Sparrows. It's 50 thousandths of an inch thick, and it sits right in there. Super happy, and it leaves all the bottom of that keyway for you to pick through. They come in real handy, and that's why we've included them in our beginner pick set that we were giving away here. We've actually got a couple more of these laying around, and we'll do future giveaways of them as well. But we chose these for a reason. This heavy bar and the other one that comes in the set when you buy the set are so useful that they will cover, I would say, a good 3/4 of the locks you're going to face early on. And so, why have 15 wrenches when one will do it? In addition to that, these other 4 picks that we've chosen here were not by happenstance. We chose all of these because they're popular profiles that do a really good job. This is a short hook. This is a low rise HD. This is an offset hybrid diamond. And this is a high reach. And each of them has their own purpose. The reason that we chose these specific profiles is because these 4 picks will get you into most locks. There's exceptions to the rule, and sometimes you need something deeper than a high reach. Something like this is not going to get you into every lock, and sometimes you're going to want a thinner tension wrench, sometimes you're going to want a thinner pick, but with this set right here and some practice, you'll be able to get into almost all beginner locks, and that's why we chose them. So looking at my set here, you'll see that there's some profiles that you've probably never seen before, and if you look real close, you'll notice that I've modified a bunch of these. So like this profile, for example, this is more like a probe, right? I stick this into locks with sliders. You see that cutout there is specifically there to be able to catch little slider nubs and move them up and down and figure out if they're bound. I made this one to deal with finger pins on certain locks. And this used to be a short hook, and I changed the shank down to something real thin so that it can slip underneath other stuff. But other than picks that I've modified myself, you'll see there's a couple of sets here that I've kind of mashed together. This one here is the only one I can identify right away because if you notice, the actual pick profile is off to the side of the handle, unlike all of the rest of these, which are centered. And this is part of the SS Dev hook set from Sparrows. SS Dev is a German group that came together to design this set for and with Sparrows, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But they are very useful against locks that have deep pins followed by very high pins. And they're also real good on locks that have very paracentric keyways with holes in the warding to pick up through. Outside of that, like I already mentioned, some of these Monstrum picks, they're of a different metal, and I've removed the handles, but some of those are very interesting profiles. This one, for example, if you look at the profile on that, it's a real extreme cut, and this is called the Lunatic, I believe. At the end of the day, everybody's going to like different profiles for different jobs. You don't need to have this many picks to get started. When you're getting your first set of picks or picking out your first couple of profiles, start simple. Something like a short hook. It doesn't have to be a short hook. Almost every company makes a hook just like that. Something a little bit deeper, like a deep hook or an SS Dev style deep hook, are very useful. And that's why we included the high reach. Where is it at? That's why we included the high reach in ours. If you look at that beginner set, you'll find that these are all picks that I actually have and use. I think it's this one actually. And they're all really good picks. So those four. I use those all the time. Something that you're going to find that is a deciding factor for a lot of people is handles though. So I don't have any good representations here other than these Peterson picks. You can see these have plastic handles on them. But you'll find the Southords have double like laminated metal handles that are riveted together. Mad Bob's, for example, has similar handles to Sparrows without the actual handle material. But it's going to come down to personal preference. The things that I want you to take away from this when you're going out and searching the internet for your picks is, 1, don't buy it from Amazon. If it's on Amazon, it's probably garbage. If it comes with an acrylic lock, then that's a pretty good sign that it's also garbage. You don't want to break the bank and buy the biggest pick set that you can before you even know which profiles that you like. So I highly recommend checking out profiles similar to the 4 that I've outlined for you. And you don't have to buy those specific ones. You don't have to buy them from Sparrows, but you'll find those profiles represented in almost all of these companies or something similar, right? And once you know the profile types that you like, then you can kind of branch out, maybe try a couple different brands and see what you like at the end of it. Another major consideration that you need to take into account is thickness. So picks generally, and I say generally because it varies out there, generally come in a couple of thicknesses. You've got 25 thousandths, 20 thousandths, 18 thousandths, and 15 thousandths. And the only ones that I recommend for beginner are 25 thousandths. Of the commonly available thicknesses, it is the thickest, and therefore the strongest. And while you're learning to avoid warding and you're really just getting going, I highly recommend that you stick with that because it'll keep you from having to buy a bunch more picks. And another thing that you'll notice that people don't generally talk about is they say that they want to use 20 thousandths or 18 thousandths so it has a little more flex and they can bend around the warding and this and that. And it's more useful in paracentric keyways and whatnot. When you start with a 25 thousandths pick, after you've used it for a few hours, few days, a bunch of hours, that pick will have actually worn itself down to closer to like a 24 thousandths or a 23 thousandths even. And then you're in a real happy place. Whereas if you start at 20, then you drop a few, you're at 18. If you start at 18 and so on and so on. 18 thousandths is pretty flexible. 15 thousandths is very flexible. I believe I have one 15 thousandths short hook, and I can identify it just by feeling it. See that? That thing flexes a ton. And while they are good for bending around warding on very difficult keyways, I don't recommend that anybody start with 15 thousandths. You are going to bend that sucker so fast. So my advice is stick with 25 thousandths. Try and find some handles that you think are going to feel good to you. Try the market out as much as you can. If you're a patient person, try a couple picks from each place. And that way you're only spending a few bucks here and a few bucks there instead of $50 on a huge kit. And then you realize, A, you don't like it, and B, you don't need half of it. So that's my input. I've taken a lot of advice from others in trying to put together this information for you. And I really hope that this didn't come off as being Sparrow's biased. I just am showing you what I have so that you have a reference point. Anyway, I hope this was really useful for you in choosing your first picks. And if it wasn't, then tell me why, and maybe I can add on to this. If you already have one of those cheaper sets off of Amazon or the internet somewhere else or from a Chinese website even, it's okay. You don't have to have professional grade picks. You don't have to have the real nice stuff out there. You are going to have to probably be a little more careful with them as they tend to be flimsy and the metal is just not as good. Everybody starts somewhere, and not all of us start with a good set or individually chosen picks. It's very hard to tell what any given person is going to need for their picking because it's really decided by the lock, the warding, what type of lock it is. And honestly, we've just touched the surface here. These are all picks for pin tumbler locks, but there's a whole different world for dimple locks, for disc detainer locks, warded locks, lever locks. They all have their own required tools, and we are going to touch on all of those in the future and tell you what we know about them. But for now, something like this, a basic pick set, will get you into most master locks, most padlocks, and most pin tumbler locks that you would find on like a house knob or a deadbolt, something like that. So let us know if this was helpful to you. If you have more questions, please ask them in the comments below and I will answer them. I tried to be comprehensive and yet not waste too much of your time. So let me know how I did. And if it's real bad, then we'll do much better in the future. Thanks for watching.